Okay, so we are live. I'm here with Benjamin. Benjamin, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, David. Thank you for having me.
It's been a while. You were on in late May 2019. Do you remember that?
I sure do.
What did we talk about at that time?
At that time, we talked about my movement away from the Catholic faith when I was in Franciscan University, and we also talked about a little bit about Jordan Peterson, and
Ah,
we went over how different descriptions of God, as far as like how it's a little you can't define him, but he's like everywhere constantly, like a fish swimming in water. So we had some interesting conversations about that and the nature of goodness and how it relates to God and how it's either separable or inseparable. And that's about everything I could remember from our last conversation.
well, that's pretty good. You have a good memory. I don't know what you've been up to. I saw you in the comments recently, but I took a lot of time off, and I don't know what your journey has been doing. But can you catch us up a little bit about if there are any sort of interesting stops along the journey, like in terms of your reading or your thinking or your philosophy, religion, anything like that? Or, I mean, even if you want to touch briefly on milestones that don't directly relate to philosophy and religion, like if you had a baby or something, you can let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I got two rowdy kids and a third on the way. So that's,
Nice.
yeah, it's pretty exciting. Trying to just keep them happy and healthy. And
Cool.
my thoughts, I did. So I've been finding more YouTubers to listen to,
Great.
and just listening to all the back and forth. Like there's Capturing Christianity, and he had this big back and forth on the Kalam cosmological argument with rationality rules, which I thought was very well formatted. So it really did justice to the argument. So it was not a "I'm trying to beat you" type of dialogue. It was a exploratory thing, so where everyone was learning more with each interaction.
Cool.
Um, and then I listened to a guy named Brett Weinstein who talked about free will in a way I'd never heard it before. So I kind of gave up on the free will argument because when I discussed it with my wife, who's also really smart, she said that regardless of which model you choose, determinism or free will, it doesn't have any, you know, it doesn't affect how you will it. She asked me, will it affect how you live your life? And I said, well, not really. I'm still going to want to eat. I'm still going to want to sleep the same way. And she said, well, then why argue about it? And I couldn't find a good rebuttal to her. So I kind of left it there for a while. But then Brett Weinstein was talking to Sam Harris about it. And as you know, Sam Harris is full deterministic all the way. But he was making a counterpoint I hadn't heard of, which was, um, well, then how do you distinguish, conscious voluntary action from those who have locked-in syndrome when there's certain illnesses that result in that type of consequence, where from all intents and purposes, from the outside, you look like you're in a coma, but inside you have all this, desires and thoughts. And he said, to go the deterministic route is to essentially say that everyone has locked-in syndrome. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that
Oh.
that kind of opened the door a little more for more interesting and further discussion on that, because
Mm.
now I'm not sure where I stand. And now it became an interesting topic again.
Now you're forced to choose. Ha ha.
Right, right. So that was kind of neat. And what was the other one? Oh, I recommend you just listen to this guy for your own intellectual pleasure. His name is Joshua Bach. He's a AI scientist,
Okay.
and my goal is to be as smart as he sounds, because he has tackled these heavy topics as well, even though that's not his field. But
Mm.
like to generate artificial intelligence, he has to have some rudimentary understanding of how emotions relate to thought, and or passion to reason, those types of things. So he's read up on all these thinkers, and he has such an eloquent way of delivering his thoughts, and they're so dense. So like it's a 3-hour discussion with this guy named Lex. I forget his last name, but man, I was listening to that mesmerized, like, wow, this guy is so smart. So I realized I'm so stupid. I really need to learn more.
The guy's last name wasn't Luther, was it? Lex Luthor?
Nope, not Lex Luthor. Lex is a Russian. I wish I remember his last name. I guess I could look it up, but Lex, yeah, Joshua Bach. Yeah. So
Joshua Bach versus Lex.
Yep. And then obviously, still following Jordan Peterson's work, he had a rough time and took a big break, just like, I mean, hopefully your break didn't entail
the
trials and tribulations that his did. But,
yeah. No.
So then I read his new book and I'm synthesizing it with, what I'm learning. And it's cool. I'm basically just happy to talk to you about topics that none of my coworkers or family are interested in delving deep into.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into that. But briefly, I have a friend who really likes JP, but I don't really follow him or his work. I know he was in a lot of trouble with addiction, with a pharmaceutical, whether it was a opiate-based pharmaceutical or something like that. Had a hellish nightmare trying to get off it, went to Russia or whatever it was. I also heard his daughter is coming on the scene in terms of putting out content. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah. I mean, obviously she's a lot younger than him, so she's kind of at the beginning of her journey, but yeah, she's had some people on her podcast, some heavy hitters and thinkers, and as well as celebrities. And, she's kind of carrying the family tradition. It looks like they're starting.
How would you characterize her worldview?
Very new. So like I would say, I don't want to insult her, but she's very fresh to this type of thing. So she had a pro-life and pro-choice person on, and she let them both completely, she gave them each an hour. And her thoughts at the end of it, I was kind of like, oh, I guess she didn't really hear much. So but that's good in a way, because the fact that she's inviting these voices on and she's interested in knowing what the truth is, that's, everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And the beauty of being young and innocent and inexperienced is there's that foolishness, like where you're willing to go where other people are shy to go. You're willing to take a leap of faith where other people are not willing to take a leap of faith. We get stodgy, we get set in our ways, we get opinionated, we get cantankerous as we go through life. We get cynical. Yep. So the beauty of youth is just like, hey, I'm going to wander over here. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Where are you going? So it's fun, it's exciting, and there's obviously danger. Right, there's obviously danger, but that's how we grow. I mean, we have to give it to the youth and let them be free. I mean, freedom. I think I think a lot of my listeners know that freedom is very, 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 very important to me as an individual. It's very important. I don't like having constraints, inordinate constraints placed on me. I accept all of the constraints, all of the normal constraints, but when someone's overreaching with their control, top-down control or manipulation, it really, really gets me into a rebellious mode. So I don't know if this is a psychological problem I have, if it's a strength or weakness or what.
I would call it a strength. There's not enough of that in the world.
So what are some of the topics? Have you got a list of topics today, or are you just going to freestyle?
I have a rough list of topics in my head, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on some things.
Yeah.
So the first topic is, do you know these two names, Michael Voris and Bishop Barron? And I would love to hear your thoughts on each of those two individuals.
Wow. So I should say as a sort of disclaimer, I avoid all Catholic media on purpose. I avoid it.
Wow.
I avoid it like the plague. Why? Because I hate politics. I hate politics. Politics. Okay. So you just named me someone from the right, someone from the left. I hate the right and I hate the left. Okay. I love Jesus Christ. I love his church. Okay. But if I have to choose, I will defend those who at least portray themselves as being faithful to Pope Francis and the Living Magisterium. So that's my sort of default Okay, who's maligning the Pope in public? Okay, I shy away from you more. So if Bishop Barron seems more faithful to the living magisterium, I'll slightly give him a few more points and a little bit more listening time. But I mean, I'm very sympathetic to those on the right. It's just that I think it's very, 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 very dangerous to start thinking that you are above the living magisterium of the Catholic Church. So that's why I keep more distance from the right than I do from the left. But I'm not a fan of the left either. Like, I mean, if you're going to start preaching that it's okay to be an unrepentant homosexual, or it's okay to kill the baby in the womb or anything like that, I'm going to give you just as much birth as I would give to someone that's saying that the Pope is the Antichrist.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that. I because I do follow Catholic media, and it's I kind of don't blame you if considering your position. Because it's crazy. Even I can't make heads or tails of it. As far as, because as you were saying, maligning the head of the magisterium. So far, I mean, the rules are still the same as far as the succession and what words his authority holds to the church and which are his personal words. Like, I feel like that is totally not part of the conversation. Like you said, it's just all sensationalized.
Yep. One of the reasons I don't follow Catholic media is that I don't trust any mainstream media whatsoever. And then the alternative media, I don't trust them either, but I do avail myself of their wacky conspiracy theories just to get an alternative point of view from the mainstream, because the mainstream is one kind of cult, mainstream media, and then you've got this alternative cult over here. It's just good to sort of map out and stretch the sort of possibilities of interpretation of some of the so-called news, quote unquote news, like, because things do happen. Like, I mean, if a bomb goes off in my city, in Montreal, if a big bomb goes off, a bunch of people die, and the water mains are broken, and the electricity's off in a couple of neighborhoods, and all this sort of thing. It's like, that's a real event. These are facts. Yeah. Something happened. I don't know what happened. Tune into the news, and you're going to get a story. Okay, it was a bomb, or aliens landed, or it was terrorists, or this or that. It's like, we really have a hard time today with journalism, because instead of just giving the facts and letting people sort of do a lot of speculation and interpretation, the journalism today is giving predominantly the interpretation, the spin. What does it mean? And I've always known that the reliability is very low in terms of when they start giving their opinions or start interpreting. If I ever do a fact check on their opinion, I'm usually justified, in my opinion, that the standards of journalism have really dropped. If they were ever high to begin with, I might have a romantic idea of some golden era where journalists were seeking the truth and presenting the truth, and if they had biases, they were honest about their biases and this sort of thing. I don't know if that was ever the case, but that's sort of a fantasy I have about the good old days. So, I mean, that's a right-wing trait, like having this fantasy about the good old days. The left-wing trait would be to say, well, in the future, we're moving towards this golden age of journalism, and if only we can get everyone hooked up onto their iPhones and all the data, then we can have perfect transparency, and we'll know everything about you and your health and your movements and your shopping habits, and this is the beautiful future. You have to sign up. If you don't sign up, you're my enemy, and we're going to put you in a concentration camp. So just sign up, because this is the best thing for the future of humanity. Okay? That's the left-wing nightmare. Yeah. So it's a crazy world.
Yeah, and that tendency, I feel like that tribalism, like you said, when you lose that youthful foolishness to listen, you think, oh, okay, I'm 40 years old, or insert age here. Now I don't need to search anymore, and now I found this trusted source, and I'm just going to shut everything else down. And I think it is worse. I don't know if it was as good as your romanticized version of it was, but I think the internet and the clickbaity necessity to survive actually forced their hand into false sensationalist journaling, because those that even try to put 5 minutes of truthful journalism in, they're completely ignored and passed over for the Vatican's on fire click,
Pope's been arrested. You know how many videos I've seen on BitChute? The Pope's been arrested for pedophilia. You know how many times I've seen that?
Probably a lot.
It's ridiculous. But I mean, the Pope may well be a pedophile. He may well be the Antichrist. But until I have good reason to believe that, you know what the good reason to believe that would be? When the church stops saying the name of Pope Francis in every single mass, right? Like I go to mass pretty much every day, and every day we're praying for our local bishop, Christian Lepin, and the Holy Father, Pope Francis. So until that stops, there's absolutely, that's the bare minimum. I would need at the bare minimum to stop seeing that the church is officially paying homage to the Pope and they're naming the Pope by name. That's a pretty good tell about what the current situation is. Now, the church is sluggish and slow to move, so it might be that in 100 years we look back and we say, oh, well, this Bergoglio was the Antichrist, but the church was unaware of that fact and they kept praying for him and referring to him as Pope Francis, and it only came out, as...
Well, there have been, as you know, in the Middle Ages, people that referred to themselves as the Pope that were not good people.
Yeah. For sure. But what I think when I am at my particular judgment and God's like, what the hell were you doing? Why were you calling Bergoglio Pope Francis? Why were you doing that, David? And it'd be like, because that's what your church told me to do, okay? And then God will just blush and say, okay, come on into heaven.
I guess, it's a little hard when, unless you speak Italian, or I'm not sure what language Pope Francis speaks. Spanish, isn't it?
Spanish, Italian, English, French, German, Portuguese.
I guess it's unless you're seeing it with your own two eyes directly, trying to interpret it through, a news outlet and their interpretation. It's definitely not reliable.
I have a little story for you about that. The Sedevacanists, right?
Yes, very familiar with him.
Do you know Stephen Heiner? I've interviewed him 2 or 3 times. Stephen Heiner.
Is he older with a goatee?
No, he's a young Asian-looking guy. Lives in Paris, France. Nice guy. I like him a lot. Okay, he's a very generous guy. He comes on my show, and we get along. And there's a bit of tension, obviously, over issues to do with the papacy and stuff like that. But I like him. I think he's a nice guy. He runs a channel called Francis Watch or something like that, or I don't know if it's a channel or if it's a show or something like that. But he he told me one time about how Bergoglio, as he calls him, did some very vicious move on a child. Like the child was praying with the prayer hands, and Bergoglio came up and forced his hands apart and said, "No, you can't pray," and whatever.
What?
Yeah. And so I went on Francis Watch on the website, and I watched the video of Pope Francis and his interaction with this young choir boy or whatever. This boy was probably 6 years old, dressed in white, and he was standing there, sort of accompanying the audience that the Pope had. He was just sort of on the sidelines with some other people just standing at attention, sort of thing. And this guy this young 6-year-old had his prayer hands, and he was really cute. And the Pope just walked up and he pulled his hands apart, the boy's hands apart, saying, "What's happening? Are your hands magnetized to each other?" And he patted the kid on the head and gave him a smile and a kiss, and it was just like the most natural grandfather kind of love, simple, real love, friendly, familiar, nothing threatening, nothing bullying. It was amazing. And it's like, oh my God, our Pope is a saint, okay? Because he just knows how to love people,
right?
Okay? Naturally, simply. And it's being twisted and spun by the Sedevacanists, among others, trads. That this guy's a monster, and he wants to stop young people from doing the traditional prayer posture. You have to be. How do you let yourself get that deluded about reality that you see the same video clip that I watch, and you interpret it so radically. How does that happen?
It's funny. It actually happens even in secular media. I think it was with the guy who played Aquaman, and he was like, the paparazzi was ganging up on them, so he pulled his daughter, aside to kind of protect her, and of course his hand touched her chest slightly, very non-sexually, and the same exact spin happened. He's doing this and that, and this is totally inappropriate. And then you watch the video, you're like, not at all.
Yeah, you project much, you sick fucking perverts. Excuse my language.
Oh, you feel free to cuss around me. I love cuss words.
These people are sick in the head. They're sick in the head, and we're seeing it more and more. This is the thing about Satan and his minions, and that includes the humans that he's fooled, at least temporarily. I hope it's temporarily. The politicians and the corrupt people that he's fooled here on Earth. I'll just focus on Satan. He overplays his hand. He will not be able to contain his excitement, and he will overplay his hand. I think C.S. Lewis talks about this too. Like, it's just like he can't contain himself. He's not. God tells us that Satan is the most subtle of all the creatures, like the serpent, whatever. It's like, no, this guy's not subtle. This guy is not subtle. He's an idiot. He's a complete idiot. He's showing his face. The mask is falling now. We can see it all over society, and it's ugly. It's really ugly.
So, okay. We will continue to talk about Satan because I like that topic too. But what I want to hear from you is set me straight on what I'm hearing about Pope Francis and the Latin Mass. Because when I was Catholic, I was definitely on the Latin Mass is better camp. I acknowledge that the Novus Ordo was valid, more kind of begrudgingly. And then I'm hearing whether this is spin or factual, I'm not sure, is that he has put new restrictions on the ability to perform the Latin Mass. And that was one of the big controversies that the Catholic media, left and right, were talking about. And I wanted to know, what do you think of the Latin Mass versus Novus Ordo versus what Pope Francis actually said versus what the news is saying he said?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the media is saying. I would imagine the media is spinning it left, right, whatever, My perspective is very simple. It's not going to be exciting for either side. They're going to be like, wow, that's boring, okay? My perspective is what I would consider very traditional and conservative perspective, which is that Vatican II is a legitimate council. We've given over, I don't know, how many years since the 60s has it been? I mean, it's been about 50 years or something, more than 50 years.
Yeah,
right?
60.
60 years. Okay. Yeah. It's like we've given you time to adjust. Okay, we've given you time to adjust. Now we're just going to try to implement the Novus Ordo more completely, right? It's like, the Latin is given pride of place. Gregorian chant is given pride of place. Do we see that in the parishes? No, we don't. You would need to go to some sort of rad-trad right-wing place to get what Vatican II promises, okay? That's the paradox. The paradox is you got to go to the rad-trads to get what Vatican II emphasizes, right? But this is a very messy and complicated thing. There are going to be people resisting on the right, resisting on the left, and people on the left trying to make a future church where everything's wacky and weird and just has nothing to do with the gospel. And so it's all a big messy thing. But at the bottom line, when all the dust settles and when the historians look back on this time, they're just going to say Vatican II was a real council. There was resistance, there was chaos, Satan was going wild with all the spirit of Vatican II and messing up this, that, and the other thing. And then there's of course the pedophilia stuff that Satan injected into this whole atmosphere also. And then that can be blamed on Vatican II. And it's all the council, it's the council, it's the council, it's the council. No, the council is the Holy Spirit guiding his holy church in closer and closer to the truth. And the disciplines and those things that are not dogmatic, they're also true and good and wholesome and appropriate to the time. And, there are, in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, diversity, and in all things charity. So this is straight out of Vatican II. It's like, this is the basic bottom line when it comes to these councils. They're adapting to the times without compromising, right? Without changing. There's no dogmatic change whatsoever. So I think Pope Francis is right to move ahead and to push forward with Vatican II. If I had been one of the recent popes, I would have been strong-arming even more violently the reforms of Vatican II and squashing rebellion. Squash the rebellion of the left in the church. Squash it violently. That's what I would have done. Does that make me right? Does that, now the question is, does that make me right-wing or left-wing? Is that a right-wing move or a left-wing move to squash the rebellion against the progress of the church? I mean, I don't know if that's right-wing or left-wing.
I think it depends on your method of squashing, because you can squash a rebellion through direct communication. You can make yourself unambiguously clear as to your goals and your motives and why the direction is the way it's going. Like, I actually had to kind of invent a reason. I was talking to a rad trad back in when I was high school. She didn't believe in John Paul II of all people. I'm like, you can't hate John Paul II. You're crazy. But she did, and because she thought that, all the same thing, the Vatican II thing. And I told her, well, think about the barrier of entry to people who are unaware of the faith. And you have the Latin Mass, which I'll grant, you could say on the order of beauty is X, Y, and Z values. If we're trying to save more souls, wouldn't it make more sense to, have a mass that communicates the same language as the people attending the mass, and so they can hear the message? Like, it just made sense to me. I don't know if that's why that's the true reason behind the Vatican II Council, or what was discussed, or how the Holy Spirit guided them, but that was how I always saw it. So I kind of was able to keep my feet in both sides, as far as this is my personal preference on one hand with the Latin Mass, and here's this rational, pragmatic, reasoning behind the Norvis Ordo, and the church's reasoning behind standing by it.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the Vatican II, if you read the documents of Vatican II, and particularly the documents that deal with the liturgy in detail, Latin isn't removed from the vernacular masses, right? It's not removed, right? Like, you're supposed to be doing predominantly Latin with certain sections in the vernacular. So the spirit of Vatican II has said, just remove the kneelers, take the altar off to the side and do this and do that, and we're just going to have completely in English, and we're going to have clowns on the stage, and we're going to have dancing girls and this and that and the other thing. It's like, that's not in the documents, sorry. So on the one hand, I applaud Pope Francis for saying, look, let's just do the Vatican. Let's do Vatican II. Let's implement the council, right? On the other hand, on the ground, it's extremely messy, and people are just doing what they want to do, basically. Like, I mean, I am disappointed. I'm disappointed in the bishops that they're not more strict with their priests. But I haven't lived a day in the life of a bishop. I would imagine that it's a nightmare. It's a headache. It's a hassle. There's politics. There's money. The money issue alone probably keeps these people from sleeping at night. They probably have to take drugs to sleep at night because of the money issues, right?
Yeah.
Have you been inside a Catholic church lately?
No.
It's like going to ancient Greece, the ruins of ancient Greece. It's it's falling apart. Like, it's just the infrastructure is falling apart. Like, these buildings are falling apart for the most part here in Montreal. Like, I mean, I could show you the church I went to 1 or 2 weeks ago. I just tried it out. The reason I wanted to try it out is because it looked like something out of a horror movie. It was overgrown with weeds and like graffiti, and it's like,
oh my gosh.
I saw someone coming out of the side building, like the I forget what they call that building on the side of a church, but there was a little family coming out, and I said, "Oh, this church is active. What's going on?" And she said, "Yeah, there are masses here at 11 o'clock on Sunday." So I came back on 11 o'clock, or I think it was 10 o'clock on Sunday, and they just do it in a little side chapel. And it was very small and intimate. And afterwards, I talked with a couple of people, and they said that the building has been condemned. It's formally condemned. It's going to be torn down. Wow. And I mean, this is a very extreme case. But today I went to my parish, I've moved last year. I moved, so I'm in a new neighborhood. It's a new parish for me, but it's a nice church, but it's very run down. Today I met the organist and he took me upstairs and showed me the organ. It's amazing. I mean, when I say he showed me his organ, the anti-Catholics are going to go to town with that. Okay. But anyway, have fun with that. If that's your thing, go for it. But anyway.
I'll take that clip. Yeah.
Yeah. So, beautiful, huge organ with multiple parts and all of it. He showed me the intricacies of this. It's just amazing. Like I asked him, I said, you're an organist, you've been an organist for 40 years. If you could travel the world, you could just magically choose any of the organs in any of the countries of the world. Which organ would you choose to play? He said, I would choose this one right here. He said it's magnificent. And so it's quite an experience. But all of this to say that he took me into the sort of guts of the church, up top into the rafters and where the organ is and all that sort of thing. And it's in disrepair. I mean, I really felt like I was in, what's it called? Beauty and the Beast, or what do they call that? What was the original novel where the guy's ugly and is in the church tower?
Phantom of the Opera.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Something like that. Yeah. You know that kind of romantic feeling of, wow, this old church and it's falling apart or whatever. Like a horror movie. But no, the state of affairs in the church is pathetic. So the reason I talked to the organist, I know I'm rambling a lot here, but I'll let you speak afterwards. But the priest, after the Mass, said, we're looking for lectors, we're looking for people to read, we're looking for people to serve, and we're looking for volunteers. And if you have any ideas to how to help the parish, talk to the organist. So I went and talked to the organist. I said, my French isn't that good, so I'm not comfortable like going up and doing the readings, but is there anything else I could do? And so I might help out a little bit with some their website, stuff like that. I do help another chapel with websites. So, now there's a reason why I'm telling you this story about the. So the reason that I talked to the organist is because I said, look, what's going on here? Like, we've got 12 people in this church. I said, the capacity of this church is probably 200-300 people, right? He said, no, the capacity of this church is 965 people. So wow. It's like we've got a dozen people and there's room for almost 1,000. Mm-hmm. I said, what can we do? Like, should the priest said, like, if you have any ideas for a program to help the parish, talk to the organist. So I'm talking to you. What can we do? What can I do to help you to get people in the pews here? He said, oh, well, people have free will and they don't want to come, whatever. I thought that was a lackluster response. But I'm like, should I go out in the street and like invite them in? Like, what's going on? He said, no, COVID. And we used to have a lot more people, like twice as many people. Oh, really? So twice 12. So you had 24 people coming?
Right.
The capacity is 1,000. It's like, am I the only one that thinks that we need to start going out into the streets? Like, what's your perspective on that as an ex-Catholic?
Well, I kind of have a snarky response. So my snarky response is, God tends to task humans to do his work a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of things that he could do. Yeah. So my unsnarky response would be, I actually heard that same exact discussion was talked about between Bishop Barron and Jordan Peterson. Ooh. Actually. And Jordan Peterson's response to him on that topic was that the church has been more afraid of challenging people lately. Like, they've toned down the the reality of hell. They've kind of trying to do the hope that all can be saved. Has been emphasized more strongly. Whereas Jordan Peterson was saying what people are starving for is a challenge and a the test of life and a call to greatness and to sainthood that is going to be a trial and tribulation. And and that's natural in the human soul. And so Bishop Barron was like, oh, you might have a point.
Yeah. You do know it's ironic that the one slogan that represents best the Second Vatican Council, the one slogan that best represents the spirit, the true spirit, if there is a spirit of Vatican II, the slogan that best represents it is the universal call to holiness. So the saints are heroic in their virtue. So the only tragedy in life is to not have been a saint, right? So this is an adventure. Like if you want to talk about it in terms of Joseph Campbell, you know, the great arc of that storyline.
Yeah.
And this is ironically at the heart and center of the Second Vatican Council. And you would never know it by looking at the lackluster response of priests, bishops, organists, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying anything against this organist. He's a lovely man. Or against my priest, or against the bishops.
To elucidate a point you've been making is there's Vatican II and what it says, and then there's what people see on the ground. And and being able to distinguish where Vatican II ends and where female clowns on the altar begin. Like nobody has the means other than looking up the document itself, which everyone should do if they're Catholic and are interested. I guess people like that is, I think, where the water gets muddied.
For sure.
And that's why. So they're making an association. Oh, what is this, grotesque display of lack of reverence? And then they hear, oh, Vatican II. Oh, well, I'm against this, even if they wouldn't be against Vatican II had they only read it.
Yeah. Well, there's a crisis in medicine. There's a crisis in education. There's a crisis in law enforcement. There's a crisis in justice system and prison system. Like, I mean, it's just like it's a hot mess. Not to mention politics, right? But the golden thread running through all of this is corruption, right? Like, I mean, you are just compromising your principles, or you just don't have any principles, and that's why I'd rather just go along to get along. I'm not gonna take a stand on this issue. Like, I mean, I'm the newest teacher, and like, who am I to speak out against? Who am I to raise all these idealistic principles that I learned at school when I was being trained to be early childhood education or whatever? Like, that's all just theory now here in the trenches. And like, I mean, I need the money. I can't rock the boat. This is a new job, whatever. It's like, just like, people cave and they just start compromising the principles. It's just the way it is. And we talked about journalism. It's the same thing. It's like, you're going to go in all naive into your journalism job. Are you really going to have the balls to get fired on day one? I don't think so. Yeah.
And then it piles up because then you've established that as who you are and what you've been doing. And then now to backtrack is even more difficult than starting off forthrightly from the get-go.
Can you imagine the resume of someone who sticks to their principles? It's like, let's see your job experience. Wow, you've had a lot of jobs, and they all lasted one morning. One morning here, you did the morning here, the afternoon there, and morning here, the afternoon there. It's like, wow, you're hard to employ. So...
Yeah, I mean, and like I think the same, it's funny you listed off all those institutions and their failings. I think they're failing for the exact same reason, that as far as there's an association. So you have the law, and then you have, laws that people voted on. And then you see cops like beating down innocent kids, and then they make that association. Oh, the law means beating down kids. Well, then defund the police, even though that's not what it was. Like, it's kind of an oversimplification and an overgeneralization. Like, you kind of have to have a higher resolution of what specifically the problem is, instead of making a big category and throwing the baby with the bathwater. Yeah.
We were talking about Satan earlier. It would be, I mean, it is a little bit blasphemous to do these thoughts experiments, but I do these thought experiments about how fun it would be to be Satan or one of his minions, because it's easy to mess stuff up. Right. And it's like, I'll be honest with you, when I play video games like sandbox open world video games, they're I think they're very demonic, right? But because of all the sex and violence. But when I play them, my objective is to just mess things up. Like, that's my objective. It's just fun to watch the artificial intelligence world respond and see if I can break it. How can I break this and twist this and pervert that? So I think it's, in a certain sense, fun to be demonic in that way, or to be satanic, or to just break everything, invert everything, lie, cheat, steal, rape, torture, kill, like everything, destroy.
I think it's because there's a a return on your investment for a single activity being destructive versus maintaining a structure. I mean, you can spend hours of labor maintaining a building, but you can spend 50 minutes with a wrecking ball and just have the time of your life. And like for one press of the button, you get X amount of enjoyment versus sanding the limestone just right, you know, and you don't even really perceive a difference, even though you are in the long run. But that satanic appeal is totally a thing.
Yeah. You know how long it took to build some of these cathedrals in Europe? Like
multiple centuries.
Ridiculous. And then, you know, I've got an interactive map. One of my friends, Steve, sent me not interactive map, but a map of all the churches in Canada that have been destroyed ever since they discovered these alleged victims, these babies that were abused, tortured, killed, whatever, by residential schools in Canada. I don't know if that made your news there, where you are.
No.
Yeah. So residential schools, these were predominantly Catholic, some Orthodox schools. But the point is that we have a native community here, different tribes or First Nations that are sort of put in prison camps in exchange for not having to pay taxes, and they get free goodies. It's sort of like a reservation style deal, right? Like it's like, we're taking your country, but you can live in this little place and you don't have to pay taxes, and just go away, and you can go on welfare, and you can become addicted to alcohol and video games, whatever. Okay, so it's a raw deal. It's a bad deal. And you want to talk about racism, like everyone's up in arms, racism, Black Lives Matter. Well, the Indigenous lives don't matter. Like, we're just treating these people like fifth-class citizens. Anyway, so there's a lot of outrage about that. But then people like the same BLM Antifa types just started like burning down churches. Like these churches, like they're people in the Indigenous community. It's like, yes, I'm part of this First Nations tribe. And it's my grandfather. It's my grandfather that built this church. My grandfather was a Catholic. He built this church, like with his own hands, with the help of the community. It's my family. It's my community. We're Native people. This is our place of worship. You burned it down. You're a white man. You come in with you're a white woman, highly educated, and you come in to protect me, and you burn down my grandfather's greatest work. And it took, you know how much blood, sweat, and tears he put into this building?
Well, even that same type of hypocrisy was happening when it started, where the riots were starting, which for George Floyd, and then Black owners of businesses were getting rampaged and their life savings ruined. And I'm like, wait a minute, hey, that totally contradicts your whole message. What's going on here?
Oh, you have to laugh, but I mean, I wish I could cry. I really wish I could cry. I wish I could cry first and foremost over my own sins. I pray to God, give me the grace of tears, because unless I can shed a tear for the pain that I've caused my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, unless I can shed a tear for the affronts I've done to God Almighty, I mean, I think I'm in danger. So I pray to God to give me the tears. But I also want to be able to cry over the atrocities of the world, the victims of their fellow man, like how people are just going astray and hurting each other. But I find it hard. I find it hard to conjure up sympathy and compassion, empathy, and my heart is cold. How do you feel as a human being in 2021 with the news? The news is tragic. It's always been tragic my whole lifeline. How do you connect? Or do you not want to connect? Do you not want to be vulnerable?
Well, it's like you said, it's a survival mechanism. If you let yourself feel for all the tragedy, you simply wouldn't be able to function. You have to cold your heart a little bit just to be able to listen to it at all. Or you could not listen to it. But there's no compatible way to infeed that stream of tragic world events and keep your heart as empathetic as you would like it, because it would ruin, that's my thought. I took a personality test, and I'm very low in compassion, which I was kind of surprised, because I feel a lot of empathy towards my family and friends, but I did, this test is for a broad spectrum, like over the course of your life, like on average compared to other people. And so compared to other people, I'm extremely low in compassion. So I'm probably more able to watch the news and try to think of solutions in a more cold, calculated way versus feeling sorrowful.
When's the last time you consumed a news item and you said, hey, I could do something about that, and then you went and did something concrete and it helped the situation? When's the last time that happened?
Never.
Never.
And I think that's another.
Makes you wonder why people feel like they're all grown up when they watch the news, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it actually, there have been times where it frustrated me to the point where I was ruined, at least for that night. I forgot what news it was, but I was so frustrated that I couldn't do something. Like, it was the proximity.
Was it when the Canadians lost the Stanley Cup?
No, no, not a sports guy.
I know, I'm joking. Never mind.
Yeah, but it was something to do, like, it was such a needless crime, and it was such an easy solution, and there were so many people that could have done it and didn't. And I remember watching and feeling so frustrated. Like, if I was only within proximity, I would have, I mean, of course I would tell myself that. Who knows?
You would have saved George Floyd's life.
Right. Yeah, similar. Exactly. Well, I don't know. I actually have an interesting story on that. So I was all right, just to preface this, it didn't end tragically, but I didn't know that in the moment. So I was driving and there was a car accident, and it was a family SUV. And so the car crashed. There's kids in the car. The doors were smashed in, and there's gasoline pouring underneath this steaming car. And I am 20 feet away. And I had a real test of character and conscience, because I was like, I should probably rush out there and help get the kids out of the car. But if that car bursts into flames, then I'm in flames, and then my family has no dad, or a dad that was consumed in flames. But then, was that worse or better than the kids being in flames when all I had to do was just go and open that door? And it took me like that was the longest 15 seconds of my life. And luckily the guy behind them was like, because I think the two parents in the front were too stunned to start doing anything. And they're alive and not, mortally injured. And luckily the parents were able to get out. They had to kick the door open and grab their kids out of the car. But I remember thinking to myself, I did a lot of self-reflection. Like, you kind of have a model of what you would do. And then when the rubber hits the road, I just froze.
Humbling, very humbling.
Yeah,
for sure. But you had the right impulse. You had the right desire. There was the equation was a dilemma, really. Like, it was a dilemma for you. And, you don't need to beat yourself up about that. I think your approach was a noble one. And your analysis after the fact is an honest one. So,
thank you.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
There's some people. I saw a video of a so-called nurse on BitChute. There's a lot of crazy stuff on BitChute, but a nurse bragging about how she's injecting everyone with this poison, and these fools are all going to die. And whether that's true or not, I mean, it's a separate question, right? But she believed that these so-called vaccines for so-called COVID are death jabs. And she's just laughing, like, these fools want to get it. Okay, well, I'll just line them up. I don't care. Line them up. I'll just do as many as I can. So that there's a special place in hell for these people, right, that have ill will like that. You're supposed to do no harm. Right?
Yeah, I feel like, so here, let's segue this into the free will thing. So I think I mentioned this before, but maybe I don't remember your response to it. So let's isolate this factor of decision making, which is that motivational instinct that we subjectively experience. And now contrast the good-willed person who has that motivational experience with this person you just described that has the opposite. She wants to harm. She feels that instinct. It motivates her in a behavior that is harmful, and then she finds it rewarding to execute that behavior. Now, the thing that I lean towards in the direction of determinism, even if it doesn't lead completely to determinism, is you didn't choose that emotion. And I think that we could be fooling ourselves to think that we can choose against it. I think even if we choose against it, it's only for another more generalized motivation, or maybe a conceptual motivation. But I feel like the motivations that spring up in us is all that exists as far as motivating behavior. So as much as I am motivated to condemn that behavior, part of me thinks to myself, well, I wasn't born with the same disposition as that evil intentioned woman was, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I when someone really wants me to unravel free will or make a convincing argument for how it might be possible that we really and truly are free to go against our instincts and this desire and that consideration and this more general consideration and this more specific one and the one that's acute and the one that's, it's like, if someone asked me to try to theoretically unravel all that, or at least speculate about all that, I just sidestep the entire issue and I say, there are two cases. Either we have free will, I mean, I'm speaking from a Christian perspective.
Okay.
Either we have free will and we have a responsibility to choose wisely, to choose life, and that our eternal destiny is on the line, heaven and hell, right? That's what I believe. Or not. And if not, I mean, then Christianity is false and all the monotheistic religions are false, and we're just going to end up being worm food, plant food, whatever you want to call it. We'll be 6 feet under, and we'll just, our molecules get recycled into whatever comes next, right? So it's like, is there a difference between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for any human? Is there a difference? If there is no difference, if you just end up being worm food, then eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die and you're just plant food. So if you believe in Christianity, if you believe in some, it doesn't have to be Christianity, it could be Hinduism, it could be Buddhism, there are different forms of Eastern religions that believe in the survival of the individual, right? Some believe that there's only God and that we are just part of God and we're all going to go back to the Godhead. And so there's only heaven. There's only heaven, right? So in that case, you may as well not have free will, because no matter what you do, you're going to end up going back to your identity, your true identity, which is the Godhead. It's just like there's a happy ending. It's called heaven. It's called your God, and that's all there is. And the other, the separation, is an illusion, Maya. Okay, so that's why I don't favor the Eastern religions, right? I think they're foolish. I think it's just hard solipsism. It's just, there's just God, your God. That's it. Now, in terms of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we have, among most of those mainline forms of those religions, we have the very real possibility of heaven or hell, and you have to choose. And so the atheist or the agnostic or the one who hasn't committed to a monotheistic religion is in the sticky situation of saying, well, if, Pascal's wager, like, I mean, it matters or it doesn't matter. Like, I got to decide, I got to commit. And the beauty with Pascal's wager is that if you're wrong, when you commit to Christianity and Christianity is false, you don't lose anything. But if you commit to paganism and paganism is false, you end up in hell.
Well, there is a hidden link in that Pascal's wager, though, that I'd like to sleuth out, which is there can be a universe of free will and a universe of monotheism, but depending on the monotheism, your behavior and your choices of your free will may or may not be tied to your ultimate fate. So it's logically consistent to pose a monotheistic universe with free will agents where, regardless of their moral behavior, they're going to end up the same place.
Yeah, sure. That's when you abandon the reality of justice. But monotheism teaches that justice is real, truth is real, goodness is real, health is real, beauty is real, and they all are united together, and they're all united in the person of God, right? So all the monotheistic religions teach this. Justice is real. You don't go toward truth without simultaneously moving toward justice. So if there is a God, he is the source of all the pure perfections, truth, justice, beauty, goodness, etc. Okay? So if there's no God, just do what you want to do. That's it. So basically, the way I see, there are two worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
There's the worldview of Aleister Crowley and the law of Thelema. Do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt. This is my advice to everyone. Do what thou wilt. You're an atheist? Great. Do what thou wilt. You're a Satanist? Do what thou wilt. You're a Catholic? Love God and do what thou wilt. That's St. Augustine, what he said.
Yeah.
The one maxim, love God and do what thou wilt. So all Crowley did was remove God.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Do what thou wilt, right? So the fundamental option is, are you going to love God or not? Because either way, it's the same advice. The religions are in agreement. The two religions are in agreement that you should do what you want to do. That's it. It's not hard. And so the real question is, does it make a difference? And if you believe in justice, then by that very fact, you believe in God, and so you are what I would consider a de facto monotheist, and you should be self-aware enough to appreciate that and get excited to worship God.
But at the same time, you know, there's a reason why there's a word for justice and a word for God, and there are relevant distinctions that, at least in theory, regardless of the truth of the matter, can be separated and thought of separately.
Yeah. I mean, we have different words for and different sort of contexts for health, beauty, and goodness, and truth, and justice, and peace, and unity, and all these things. Okay, we treat of them differently and separately sometimes, but this is just the humbling and startling situation we find ourselves in as finite creatures. And I think if you meditate on the fact that you, right now, are a finite creature, meaning that you didn't always have existence, you were brought into existence. Even if you're a naturalist, you'll say, okay, well, my parents, I would say procreated, but you might say created me in the womb of your mother or whatever. And bam, here I am. And it's all a wonderful naturalistic mystery, or a naturalistic miracle, if you want to appropriate that word.
Yeah.
But if you meditate on the fact that you're finite, that you don't know everything, you're not all powerful, you're not omnibenevolent, obviously. You meditate on that, and you meditate on the fact that your life is coming to an end soon. And then you think about the infinite. I mean, even if you want to think about it in a very cold, dry way, like on pencil, on paper, in your math class, think about the infinity symbol. Just you're sitting there and you've got this infinity symbol, and you know what that represents, right? You know what it represents. You, a finite creature, are contemplating the infinite. Just think about that. Meditate on that. I think these exercises are so humbling, and they're so mind-boggling, and then you can transport beyond your finitude. You can go beyond this sort of horizontal way of living your life, and with all its petty concerns, and you can start really confronting God in the sense that you are being confronted in your smallness by the greatness of God. I think this is a very useful exercise. How do you feel about what I've just walked you through?
So this is right up my wheelhouse. When I was 15 or 16, that was my own pet project, actually, was, starting, like, I had that same sense of awe when contemplating in math class the fact that a finite creature can contemplate the infinite. And so I built a kind of rickety syllogism from that to the Trinity back when I was in high school, because I was trying to, kind of develop my own ontological framework. And so now, looking back, what I want to propose to you is, we have this symbol that represents this boundless, the infinite. Like we have a name for it. That's enough. Now, but we may be able to construct a definition of a boundless value, or the great beyond, but that doesn't mean that we have a we don't have a corresponding idea of that in our mind. But what I'm afraid might happen is we think we're thinking about it, because we have the name for it. So, haha, I'm thinking about infinity when what you're actually thinking about is a sideways 8, and you're like, this is the best sideways 8 I've ever seen. And then it makes you more susceptible to thinking, oh, well, I'm going to assign X, Y, and Z traits to this because all those perfections also can be considered logically consistent and boundless. And what will happen is you'll inevitably, if you're talking about it, it's gonna be wrong in your mind, you know?
Yeah. What comes to mind is I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, so you'd have a map of the world, right? So you're sitting there in your living room eating chips and drinking Coca-Cola. This is not sponsored, by the way, this talk, but soda.
There you go.
And you've got your little crappy map, right? The dungeon master made for you. And you're like, wow, cool. Let me see that. And you take a look at it, and you kind of enter into that world, like you do, especially because you've been wandering around this world, right? And so there you see it on paper. Wow, oh yeah, there's where we had the little mini adventure with the ogre, and there's where we did this and that, and remember that? Oh, I remember when we did this and that, the other thing. And you go down memory lane looking at this map that the DM finally put together for you. And I had a drawing of my characters. I had drawings of my characters, and we all did drawings of our characters. And it's like, it's the same thing with this mathematical symbol of infinity, right? It's like it transports you. It transports your imagination. It transports your mind. So the ultimate fundamental question is it a fantasy? Is it just imagination? Is it just a silly kids game, or is it some demonic deception, right? Like, I mean, I think D&D is demonic just because that's the sort of consensus of the Catholic consensus on it. So it's like, that's dangerous, whatever, right? The content.
I actually didn't know that. I had heard that, but I didn't know that there was any consensus on that.
It's not a full consensus. It's not dogmatic by any stretch of the imagination, but I have chosen to err on the side of caution.
I see. Okay.
And I know that I love the demonic. I know that I love Satan. I love, like I said, the destruction, the chaos, the confusion. Like I was always playing a very devilish character in D&D. I would always be chaotic neutral. Okay.
Nice.
Chaotic neutral. That's sort of my predisposition. Mess things up and be a shit disturber. So the map. Like the map is not the destination, right? So there's a famous saying, I forget which saint said it. I think it was Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas. I think he's the one who said, our faith is not in propositions. Our faith is in the reality indicated by propositions, or the reality behind those propositions, or the reality to which those propositions direct us.
Pointing,
yeah. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yep. Yeah, I was a big fan of Thomas Aquinas back in the day.
so this whole thing about the map and the finger, like the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. You've heard this in Eastern religions and stuff like that. So is that sort of at the heart of the conundrum that you're pointing out?
So where it becomes a problem is you can have, let's say, two arrows are pointing in opposite directions. And then you ask, well, where are the arrows? What point are the arrows pointing? There's already a problem in the phrasing of the question, because they're technically not, like, it has to be unraveled, in other words. So I feel like a lot of the monotheism from Christianity is jam-packed. Like, instead of one concept of one name, it's like 50 propositions molded into one like black hole of meaning, not in a bad way, but the density. And so I think like what is referred to as one entity is actually like 50 very complex entities. You know what I mean?
I was just thinking about the sort of interpretation of signs, symbols, gestures, and these sorts of things, and how there could be a built-in ambiguity. You could have secret handshakes in the Freemasons and this sort of thing. Yeah. And you could have, like, for example, to be silly with my wife. I used to tell her, I still tell her I love her, but I used to tell her, like, I love you this much, and I could indicate it by holding two of my fingers apart. Like, I would put my fingers as close together as possible. I love you this much, and I would, like, the fingers are practically touching, okay? I love you this much. Instead of putting my arms as far apart as I can and saying, I love you this much, I put my fingers as close together as possible. They're touching practically. I say, I love you this much. And she's like, what? And then I explained to her, well, no, it's not the area in between. It's not the distance in between the two fingers that you see here in between them. It's the distance in between them going outward from the outer finger all the way across the universe and then back to the other side of the other finger. Okay?
Nice.
So, I mean, there's a lot of room for ambiguity when it comes to arrows. Like when you talked about the two arrows pointing in different directions, the first thing I thought about is that as a physicist, I studied physics, and as a mathematician, I'm not a physicist or a mathematician, but I did study at university. There is immediately a sort of alternative solution that comes to mind where there is an intersection. There's a point of intersection. No matter how you want to point these two arrows, there's going to be a point of intersection, okay? Because of the curvature of space-time. Like, you can find the point of intersection. You would just need to have a sufficiently sophisticated model of the curvature of space-time, and you're going to find, believe me, you're going to find a point of intersection. It might spiral around the entire universe 1 billion times, 1 trillion times, but there will be an intersection point. So that's what I thought of when you said, where are these arrows pointing? Well, I would say they're pointing to that point of intersection.
Nice. That's a very creative, third way that I wasn't considering. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that those types of philosophical or, those types of solutions are available to us through reason alone. And I feel like that we're well from exhausting those options.
Yeah. The point is not to say, oh, look how creative I am. The point is to say that life is wonderfully complex, and the complexity can either overwhelm you and stifle you, or it can free you. And I mean, I don't know if you engage in poetry, music, dancing, or whatever kind of purely creative, artsy things, if you do any of those things. But I mean, there comes a point where you're like, I'm bored, I'm out of ideas and whatever, and you have to shake it up. You have to put constraints. You have to ask a friend to give you a rule. And I think it was Brian Eno, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you know his music. I think he came up with a deck of cards, maybe 100 cards of creative stimulants. And so you could just pull out 1 or 2 or 3 of these, and it's like just random sort of ideas, like what would your best friend do? Right? Like you're composing music, and the card says, what would your best friend do? And you're like, oh, what the hell? What does that mean? And you think about George and how he's always picking his nose, and that gives you an idea, right? So, I mean, it's totally lateral thinking. Like, and as human beings, we have this potential to be creative. We also have the potential to be lazy, spiritually lazy, creatively lazy. And I mean, it's all very mysterious to me, but in terms of free will, you can muster up the energy, just like you can muster up the energy if you're tired and you don't want to get up in the morning to go to work. You can just say, well, heave ho, let's go, and just, take a shower or whatever it takes to stimulate yourself. Maybe you have coffee. I don't do coffee, but some people do coffee. Like, I mean, there are little tricks to goad yourself into action. It's the same thing with your own projects, or even if you're doing parenting. Like, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I would imagine it becomes a bit repetitive and whatever if you're not, if you're letting life, the burden of life get to you, it can just become like a chore. And then you have to take a time to say, well, come on, this is not a chore. This is the best part of living. Giving myself to these young people and making their life better. And you can come up with ways to stimulate yourself to be a better parent and all this sort of thing. So all of this to say that we have a certain burden of responsibility, and it can crush us. And then we have to make the time and take the energy to find creative ways to stimulate ourselves. I don't even know why I'm talking about this, but
no, it's because what may be perceived as a dead end in a philosophical examination of the concept of God might just be our lack of creative thinking.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So just because I'm at a roadblock doesn't mean that that's the roadblock. Like
Mhm.
I'm still completely open to, those creative solutions. I've been doing a lot of reading, and I can't, I'm in uh, the self, if I have to, if it's mandated for me morally to be consistent, for my words to be consistent with my internal beliefs, I just don't have those internal beliefs because of those roadblocks. And so it would, to proclaim prematurely would be disingenuous and sinful. So I'm kind of in a interesting quandary as
Mm.
far as, that.
One of my friends that I interviewed, you can go and listen to his interview if you want. And when I say you, I mean the listener and yourself. Anthony, he always, well, not always tells me, he mentioned to me a couple of times that there are two kinds of people: those who are predisposed to religion and faith in God, and those who aren't. And he said, I, David, am predisposed, and he, Anthony, is not. So that seemed to me like a sort of sad analysis. I don't believe it. I choose not to believe that, because that's just horrible, right? That's sort of Calvinism 101 right there, I guess. But
Yeah, I didn't even make that association until you mentioned it.
I have a couple of, I'm going to let you go soon, but I have a couple of questions, because you're a bright guy with a lot of ideas. I want to just give you a couple of quick things that you're going to respond to. Okay. So the first one, before I forget it, well, there are two. One is groceries and one is gold digging. Okay, so I'll do the gold digging one first.
Cool.
So when I broke my wrist several years ago, and that led to my conversion to God. Actually, it's connected, but because I had surgery, and it's the first time I went under general anesthesia, and it was like the best time of my life. I had the best time of my life.
Awesome.
Being under general anesthesia. Why was it so much fun? Why was it fun? What? Explain to me. This is the third topic. Why was it so much fun just not being there? Like, why? How can you explain that? I woke up from the general anesthetic. I was on top of the world. I was like, oh my God, why'd you wake me up? Like, leave me there. Leave me where I was. That was amazing. But I have zero memory of it. I don't know where I went, what I did, who I talked to, But shortly thereafter, I became a monotheist. Okay? Is that causally connected? I don't know, but my gut tells me, yeah. Okay? So anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. The gold, because my wrist, I went to physiotherapy for like a year and a half to try to get flexibility back in my wrist. And they did 2 surgeries on me. Like, they put a metal rod in, and they messed it up when they tried to take it out. It's just a big nightmare. Anyway, at physiotherapy, there's a poster on the wall, and it's got like a little, miner with a shovel, like a pickaxe or whatever it is. And he's like digging through his tunnel. It's just going toward the right side of the paper. Okay, it's like big long tunnel. He's going. And then the image just shows him like sort of slouching and all depressed, walking back to the left out of the tunnel that he made because he didn't find any gold. Okay? But
Right.
the punchline of this is that if he had just given one more strike of his pickaxe, he would have found the biggest treasure, like the gold mine.
Right.
But he just turned back at the wrong time. Like, I mean, he just needed to do one more strike with his pickaxe. So the message here is one of these motivational posters. It's a corny message, but I mean, it's it's sad but true. I mean, it is tragic that people give up right at the point when they could have done just that one little bit of extra, and they would have had the reward. How do you feel about that? How does that poster strike you?
So, yeah, I agree that happens all the time in all fields and wakes of life. I'm not sure. I think what the reason why you're bringing it up is kind of, the search for religious truth. Is that where you're leaning?
I don't know. It just came to me, and I'm just talking about it. You seem to know more about why I say what I do than I do.
How funny. Yeah. Well, no, I think that is, it's, if I had to go technical, it'd be a balance of probability and, cost benefit analysis. How much gold did you want to have? Can you survive without the gold? I can make it boring, or I can make it interesting.
Yeah, but emotional impact, it's like, oh, why didn't you just
Oh
go?
yeah, the emotional impact is the same frustration. Like, oh, just you could have kept going if only you knew. Yeah.
The other question, this is going to be completely ridiculous, unconnected with religion, I think. Okay, you could probably read something into it, but I was buying groceries and, I don't have much of a filter. The only reason that I didn't say it, quite frankly, is because they make me wear a mouth diaper when I go to the grocery store. Like I have to wear a muzzle. So I wanted to say it, but I didn't say it to the girl. But the girl that was checking me out or whatever, does that sound appropriate? She was checking me out. She was checking me out because I'm so hot. But I was going to ask her, and I want to ask you, like, the fact that 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for however many months or years she's been working there, she's seen a variety of, how should I put this, purchases, or like a variety of like people coming through with their selection of products. Okay. Like, how has that impacted you? Tell me honestly, has that helped or hurt your own food choices? What do you think?
Ooh, if I were in her shoes?
Yeah, well, what do you think? Do you think that people at the checkout counter at a grocery store that have been doing it like full time for a long time, do you think that they generally, statistically, make better, healthier food choices because they see a variety of ways of shopping? Like maybe they see a lot of overweight people buying predominantly carbs and sugar. Maybe they see a bunch of young, fit people buying like vegetables and whatever. Do you think that is an advantage for them, that it helps them? Or do you think that is it possible they go the other way? Like, it's like they're being constantly tempted, like, wow, look at all these things I can buy, or like, what's your analysis of that?
I think the analysis is more towards the first idea. The only problem is there's also the genetic factor too. So what might happen, but I think that would be solved through the aggregate average, the law of averages. So I think that they would definitely get a benefit because they would see a variety of types of people, male, female, young, old, and then they would be able to glean and associate those averages. Like, all right, so this type of person is always getting Twinkies, and this type of person's always getting protein shakes. Like, and then I think whether they even want to or not, it's going to influence their shopping habits. Just there's no way because if they see it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, the next time they see it on the shelf, the images of those people buying those is just going to flash right in their conscious memory, and it's totally going to influence their shopping.
Can you imagine? This is like a thought experiment. This woman has been working since her early teens, because it's a part of the family business, this grocery store, all the way up to her 90s, her late 90s at the grocery store. Same job day in, day out. And she's seen that some of these clients, like the regular clients, is an ethnic community grocery store. Some of these clients have come in every day. They buy their beer, their cigarettes, their Twinkies, okay, every day. And other clients come in and they buy the protein shakes and their low-fat meat and their low-carb diet and their vegetables and their greens and everything else, okay? And then it's like, at a certain point, it's like, oh, where did Joe, the Mr. America workout guy, I haven't seen him in a while. Where is he? Oh, well, he dropped dead. Like, he had a heart attack, whatever. It's like, oh, well, that's weird, because this guy that's like living on beer, cigarettes, and Twinkies is still here, and he's lived to a ripe old age. You know what I mean?
It's so funny. So
are these, like, when you talk about doing an overview and analysis in the aggregate, are these outliers? Are these exceptional? Is it like, well, how do you explain this stuff?
I think that it's that your confidence in the results is directly proportional to the amount of people and factors you're taking into consideration. So the person that's been there from 18 to 90, her confidence in her results is better than someone that's been there 10 years. The person that's done it at 50 stores versus one store has a higher degree of confidence in the results she sees. I think that when it comes to the complexity of biological health, I think that people think science has gotten us somewhere, and it has, but we are basically in the Stone Age as far as the true science that is reliable, because there's how many trillion cells in the human body, all integrated, all interactive, all changing minute by minute. And then you're telling me that if you study 5 people's eating habits, that you can glean any useful information out of that. That's insane. I've seen people who, smoke 2 packs a day and they look fine. And I've seen a, 20-something-year-old soccer player just drop dead. Like, to me, we're fooling ourselves if we're telling ourselves we have any correlation. Like, maybe on the one cell to another cell, maybe we have something. But when it's a full human, forget it. Just whatever you can. I feel like that we have a long way to go.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the original Star Trek series?
I just started watching it, so I've only like 5 episodes into.
Really?
Yeah, because all the people, like, I'm into other sci-fi, and everybody else is into Star Trek. So I'm like, all right, I have to give this a shot.
What do you think of the first 5 episodes?
I really like it. I like Captain Kirk, and I love how just mature he is, and how he's able to just handle stressful and complex situations in a very mature way.
I thought you were going to say you like how he handles all the ladies.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's only in like one of. Somebody showed me like a 5-minute clip, and it was very inappropriate for today's climate versus back then. But it's really good.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring it up is because in one of the movies, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't enjoy the movie that much, but in one of the movies, I believe, or perhaps in one of the episodes, or maybe the movie was based on the episode. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But Dr. Bones, James McCoy, he's the doctor, and he was just horrified. Like, because you have to remember, this was filmed in the 20th century, but they do some time travel, and I think it's set, I forget which century it's set in, but it's way in the future, okay? And they travel through time, and they go back to the 21st century. So just remember that the audience is in the 20th century, and this fantasy is about the far distant future with all the technology and everything else. And then they travel back in time to the 21st century. So it's still the future for those who are in the 20th century watching it. So it's still the future, right? And so we naively think, well, technology is amazing today. Imagine what it's going to be like in the next century. Wow, amazing, right? But Dr. McCoy says in this episode, like, he's just horrified. And he's just horrified by 21st century medicine, like just how primitive and brutal it is, even though it was glorified well beyond what we have today in this sci-fi depiction, right? Like the 21st century stuff was like whatever. But I always think about that. Like, I always think about the relativity when we compare medical technology today to the past and to the future, and like how excited we can get about how we're the greatest geniuses that ever were, and we're at the pinnacle of society and the pinnacle of this and the pinnacle of science, and we understand so much and this and that other thing. And so as a child, I was watching Star Trek, and I learned a lot, philosophically, I think, from the show, and just the way they portray different points of view, and even the main characters like Spock and Dr. McCoy and Kirk and the others. They have these sort of Joseph Campbell archetypes that they fit into quite nicely, and so I think it shaped my psyche quite a bit watching that. It was probably my favorite show, but that particular idea has stuck with me, to be a little bit skeptical and cautious about the medical sciences, even though there's hype. And even though, like, the future is now, like, we have such advanced technology, it's like, dial it back a bit, your enthusiasm.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because we were inventing the same decade the transistor was invented, the same decade the nuke bomb was invented, and the same decade, we were sending things into space. Like, we had doctors recommending cigarettes. Like, so, there could be a mismatch depending on the field. So we might, in one field be as advanced as we could be. In another field, we might be just starting. And so to conflate our technology as one block and think we're on X level of progress just because we have a space station, we might, for inhabiting low Earth orbit, sure. But yeah,
still haven't made it to the moon though. But just joking. But plot twist, turns out, fast forward 100 years, turns out smoking cigarettes is actually the best thing you can do. I'm just joking. But with that cigarette and the grocery analogy that we made, the guy that smokes 2 packs a day and all that sort of thing, we never know. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on really when it comes to these highly, highly complex systems. And that's why I oppose very vocally. I oppose the vaccine mandates, so-called vaccines. I oppose the vaccine passport. Here in Quebec, we have a vaccine passport. Wow. I'm firmly committed to remaining a second-class citizen. I, here in Quebec right now, am a second-class citizen. I'm not allowed to go to these non-essential businesses or concerts or restaurants or, soon they're going to probably prevent me from going and getting the sacraments at church. I did phone my bishop and I phoned my auxiliary bishop and I talked to the secretaries of both of those bishops, and they asked on my behalf while I was on hold waiting to get the answer. They informed me that the bishops are assuring me that I will never be deprived of the sacraments as a Catholic,
good.
Even if I choose to remain quote unquote unvaccinated. So it's a big concern. Not because I don't think it's the greatest medicine ever invented. I don't believe it is the greatest medicine ever invented. But even if you could show me and prove to me 100% you'll lose weight, you're going to look better, your teeth will be brighter, you're going to stand taller, you're going to have a higher IQ, you're going to have clarity of thought, you're going to live to be 300 years old, you're going to have, all your dreams are going to come true. And so I think you should take it. I would be like, no, I'm not going to take it because you're forcing it down my throat. And you're removing... you're placing me in a second-class status and you're building concentration camps for people like me. So I'm firmly committed to remaining in the second class no matter what, because the issue is not health. I don't care about my health. I care about my eternal salvation. I care about free will. I care about my autonomy as an individual, that I am a human being created in the image and likeness of God, right?
Well, I'm with you on most of the conclusions, but for totally different reasons. So I'm anti-state. You could conceive of me as a philosophical anarchist. I don't believe that state authority is valid, even when I know this is kind of a radical thing, but I've read a lot of anarchist thinkers, and they've kind of convinced me that the whole thing is kind of a charade. And so that passion that you're mentioning about all this, I'm fully on board with, but for the autonomy of the individual. And so it's such an obvious farce that this government is doing this for your own good. Like, come on. Like, it's just too ridiculous. And not only that, they also failed just in their own PR management. Like, there are successful dictatorships and there's successful oligarchies, and they know how to manage public opinion. And this was just a disaster. Like, this was just, let's piss everyone off and then have, do everything wrong as far as public perception and public opinion, and just get everyone riled up. And we're going to keep the same doctor representative who admitted he lied to everybody. Like, it's just so fail. Like, it's unbelievable. And not only that, because the counter argument is, well, we're trying to protect other people. Yeah, but you're also being inconsistent because you allow people with masks to go into restaurants and then take it off for the majority of the time inside. Yeah. Like, I feel the same way. I get really exasperated.
you know that cults and other tyrannical systems use contradiction as a way of programming people, right? Like, you break them with contradictions. Like, you do not want to be consistent. You do not want to be consistent, because then then your victim has his bearings. But if you want him to lose his, if you want to disorient them, you need to confuse them with contradiction. Like, the more blatant the contradictions, the better. These are well-known techniques with mind control. Wow. They're well-known techniques. Okay?
Well, that's pretty scary.
It's dark. It's very dark. It's very dark. But the pragmatic outcome of all this satanic bullshit, the pragmatic outcome is the mask is coming off. We can see that Satan has zero self-control. He's like, he just jizzed in his pants. He's like, he's bending us over. He's like, we're screaming, no, no, no. And he's raping us mentally. Okay. He's just can't control himself. So this is the reason I don't give consent. I will never give consent to these domineering governments. And I don't even know who these governments are, like who's up above, because it's liberals, it's conservatives, it's everyone in between here in Canada. They're all saying exactly the same thing. Even though they start out saying one thing, they all fall in line. So there's someone maybe above them, or I don't know how this works. But it doesn't really matter. The point is, I will never give consent, because it's just like that innocent girl who has the jock boyfriend. It's like, if you want to find out if he's a good guy or a bad guy, do not give him consent for sex. Do not give him consent, because if he's a selfish guy and he's going to rape you, the only way to find out is to never give him consent for sex, because I can tell you, he wants to get in your pants. He wants to have sex with you. So the only way to know if he's a good guy or bad guy is to never give him consent. And then you'll find out, because I mean, right now we're getting raped and I never gave consent. So it's a bad guy. I have the proof in the pudding. He's a bad guy.
No, and it also follows historical trends too, of using an emergency, a public threat, as a precedent. And then you give them that inch, and then they take it and run. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
No. Day one, when this hit the news, and I can tell you that there are very few things in my life that came on my radar, because I avoid the news like a plague, because I don't want to be a brainwashed moron. I avoid the news, but about 4 things got on my radar during my whole life, like O.J. Simpson case, the 9/11, a couple things. Okay?
Yeah.
If it gets on my radar, it's big, 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 big news. Okay?
Yeah.
So when this came on my radar, the first thing I thought was, this is fishy. Since when do we have consensus about anything? Why is this so well orchestrated? Why is everyone on the same page? Why, this stinks.
Well,
This
here's
stinks.
another one. So, okay, even if you grant, all right, there's a whole other level of fail here. I'm going to blow your mind. So let's grant the opposing side that you're actually, the government is doing it's like enforcing masks to protect innocent people. Like, let's just give them that narrative. Okay. There's a scientist, I don't know if you know him, on YouTube, called Thunderfoot, and he is very data driven, and he's even pro mask, but he used the math and the trends of the virus and its spread to conclude that unless if 1/6 of the population did not comply 24/7 with a very specific N95 mask, that all the effort would be in vain anyways. And so even if you were able to get, 60% of people to buy in 100%, the way the virus can move and its methods of transmutation and all this, it was going to be inevitable. So a lot of this is kind of like the security at airports, where whenever they get tested, somebody's always able to bring in a weapon. It's like a public theater to satisfy the people that want to feel safe by something they can visually look and say, oh, I see people with masks, I feel safe, even though if you wear that mask more than 3 hours, then it's inert, and all these other facts that totally dismantle what happens in practice.
I said from day one, what we should be doing, and by we I mean individuals and governments, what we should be doing is saying, hey guys, seems like the bioweapon escaped or whatever, so let's, because that was my hunch, right? Let's everyone take the precautions that you feel are appropriate. For example, if Granny is vulnerable, don't spit in her mouth. How's that? Okay? If your child has a bunch of comorbidities and struggling to stay alive, don't spit in his mouth.
The
or whatever.
fact that the lockdowns were not targeted for the more at-risk groups was a red flag for me.
They killed off the old people. They killed off the old people.
Yep.
They killed off the vulnerable.
Yeah.
They kill babies in the womb. I don't know if you're pro-life or not, but they kill babies in the womb by the millions. They're killing old people by the hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions. I don't know, but they're like purposely letting people die. I have a good friend who's 83. He was neglected. He died because he got the shot. I can't prove it. Okay, I can't prove it. He was perfectly healthy, works every day, Italian guy, and he got the shot. He got both shots, and suddenly he's in the hospital, and he got completely neglected.
Oh my God.
And he just died. Like he was just left to die. His family was begging for treatment. His family was begging, do something, do something, do something. They just let him die. It's like, what is the world coming to? Like, I mean, I have this naive fantasy about the good old days in the Middle Ages, where the universities and the churches were run by the and the universities and the hospitals were run by the Catholic Church, and you have a bunch of holy nuns, and it's all just like this glorious, wonderful, good old days. So it probably wasn't actually like that. But if you look at the history of psychology and the treatment of the mentally ill, and you look at the sanitarium model and how it was first implemented in America, and how beautiful it was having the large gardens and walking around, having a lot of space, and then how that same system was overpopulated, and it was, then we started bringing in chemical treatments, and it just turned into hell on earth, like hell on earth. So it went from a little taste of heaven, where you've got this pastoral, beautiful space, and everyone has the space to regain their health and their sanity and their balance, to a hellish nightmare prison, like what we see with the justice system, where we think, hey, this 14-year-old kid got in some trouble. Hey, let's put him in this hellish nightmare, overcrowded, criminal cesspool.
Well, it's
how do you take yourself seriously as a leader of the people?
No, I think what happens is these positions are attractive to people who have certain mental problems, certain control issues in their own personal lives. And what they do is they project, and so let's say they feel really uncomfortable with their family situation. So they don't get along with their family for X, Y, or Z reasons. Instead of confronting that issue and addressing it and communicating, what they do is they feel frustrated, and they feel that they're out of control. So they're like, I need a position where I feel like I'm in control. Okay, good. I could be a cop with a baton. Great. Oh, somebody's not wearing a mask. I'm going to start whacking them. Like, that makes me feel like I'm in control. The whole time, it's their brain is trying to address a real issue that's in them and not what's external. And I think what's happened is that over the course of time, you set up these roles in society, and even if they start out great and you start up with checks and balances and redundancies and this and that, those people find their way in, and then they exude all their illness onto the world.
Why is it that in Christendom, what used to be called Christendom, England, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, why are we seeing such brutality with respect to the lockdowns, the mandates, vaccine passports, all this sort of thing? Have you seen Australia?
Yeah, I'm at a loss for words. I never would have believed it had I not seen it. It actually is very concerning.
Yeah, it's Orwellian or Huxleyan. I don't know. It's bizarre.
I hope it won't survive with social media, people with iPhones filming it. I mean, before it was a lot more easy to hide that type of brutality. And there's the anarchist thinkers I listen to, they said that this always existed, but now we're just seeing it. So that level of brutality, nothing's changed except our awareness of it.
One other topic I want to touch on briefly with respect to this nightmare scenario that we're living through now. And I call it a plandemic because there's so much planning. Like, there governments that should not be reaching into my medical decisions are like reaching down and overreaching and like imposing their will on my autonomy. So I call it a plandemic for that reason, not because I know that, I know it's the Rockefellers and I know what Bill Gates is up to, and I know I don't know any of that. I don't even care. Like, you could tell me, hey, do you want me to tell you all the secrets of all the bad guys and what they get up to? No, I don't care. Right. But there's too much planning. I don't know what the plan is. I don't care what their plan is, but I can tell you one thing. Their planning is interfering with my autonomy, my God-given autonomy. Okay, so that's why it's a pandemic. But the line in the sand that has been drawn is so profound that you see among your family and among your friends that there is an us and them dichotomy that's being set up. And I mean, it's just dramatic. It's very dramatic. Yep. And you can see people taking one of two radical positions, right? It's like they're cheerleaders and they're snitches and they're going to turn you in and they're going to bully you. They're going to pressure you. They're going to blame you. It's indistinguishable from North Korean communism, even though it's not quite that extreme yet, but all the elements are there. Yeah.
No. And it's funny too, is just to pin more holes on the other side, risk management, has to be proportional to the degree of actual risk. And I know that for certain age groups, the lockdowns were actually more harmful. If you measure mental health, if you measure suicide rates, if you measure, all these other factors, we're not responding to any other, heart disease or lung cancer. We're not making lockdowns. Yeah,
all those numbers have gone up. All those numbers have gone up. Death by those things. And the other thing is, I've always said, it would be better to do nothing, absolutely nothing, in response to this so-called pandemic. And it's not a pandemic because the definition of pandemic was changed a couple of years ago anyway. But so it's no longer a deadly or widely spread thing. It's just something that we're concerned about. So the flu now is a pandemic. Okay. I'm not saying that whatever this bioweapon is just the flu. I'm sure they tried to make it more deadly. I think it's not quite as effective as they thought it was. They hyped it up so much in their own minds. They're like, oh, guys, there's this deadly thing. It's like this weapon we made is so deadly. Well, no, it's not. It's a dud. Okay. And same thing with your solution with this mRNA and all these different technologies. It's like I think that about 20%, if that, is actually viable once it gets into the arm of the person. It has a temperature sensitivities and all these sorts of things. Yeah. And how many placebos? What percentage are placebos? I don't know. Somewhere between 0 and 50% or something like that, right? My friends think I'm crazy for even proposing the idea that they would use placebos in a trial. Well, it's a trial. They're going to use placebos. They have they have lot numbers. They have different recipes. They've already admitted they have different recipes, and they have lot numbers to track so they can compare and contrast. Oh, well, they drop dead when we use this proportion of these components. Let's dial that back. Or maybe they dial it up. I don't know. Do they want to reduce the world population? I don't know. Like I said, there's a pandemic. They're over planning. What is their plan? How nefarious is their plan? I don't know. I don't care. But just stop micromanaging my life. But this question of the people that buy completely into the system and that are completely brainwashed and have Stockholm syndrome, it boggles my mind. And we're really seeing which of your family and friends, which of them have principles and care about the individual rights and our God-given rights, and which don't, which want to go along to get along. And I often think about the comparison with Nazi Germany, and I don't think it's that it's inappropriate. I don't think it's an exaggeration. I think the Germans were nice people. I think that they just compromised a little bit on their principles, just a little bit every day. And I said today to my wife, it's like some of these so-called Nazis were just, their only job was to welcome the Jews into the camp. They're like, hi, welcome, go this way, your bunk's over there. That's all they did. They didn't feel bad about it. They're just like, work is freedom. This is the way to freedom. This is what you have to do. And it's just little compromises here and there. That's what corruption is. And the evil overlords of the satanic world, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. I actually do believe that this world is run by Satan and his minions, and that there are people who are doing the bidding of Satan because they love money, power, illicit pleasures, whatever it is, right? But they depend, like I think you said, they depend on the complicit cooperation of a certain percentage of the population. And they're getting more than I think is reasonable to expect. Now, speaking of these expectations of compliance, anyone in his right mind who says, oh, there's this disease and we have to get everyone vaccinated for herd immunity, and so we need a certain percentage of the population to get vaccinated with this experimental stuff, it's the only way, and the solution I propose is that we have to have everyone vaccinated, everyone on the planet has to get vaccinated. That's my plan, that's my solution. The first thing I would say to that moron is, you're a moron, because have you ever met a human being? Have you met one? Because some of them like to go against the grain. Some of them like to be a stick in the mud. Some of them like to say fuck you, right? No matter what you propose. I happen to be one of those people, by the way. So have you met a human being? It's ridiculous.
And on top of everything, you were talking about, going through the trials for the drug. Even the virus itself has completely wildly different effects on people, and nobody knew the cause. So you have all this level of confidence in this solution, and you don't even understand the problem.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. The central issue for me, the most important thing that we learn about our friends, our family, our neighbors, and ourselves is, where do you draw the line? What's important to you? What are your principles? Right? And it's being revealed. Yep. It's being revealed, and it's tragic. It's sad. There's still time to convert. I think a lot of people are converting. I've seen people on BitChute. I mean, BitChute's full of crazy people, but there are people on BitChute saying, I have buyer's remorse and I was sold a bill of goods and I thought I would only need 2 shots. Now I'm signed up for infinite shots and 2 pills a day. And when you realize the train that you've gotten on, it is like the Jews getting on that train. It's like, oh, I'm going to a work camp and I'm going to work. It's not so bad. No, but I mean, it's too late. You're on the train. Like, you're screwed.
How much is too much? I mean, soon they're going to not let anybody drive because of all the car accidents. It's like there is a level. Everyone's willing to accept a certain level of risk to function in society at all. And so if you let that train of logic take you, oh, well, I'm trying to be safe, then you're going to just end up in a solitary confinement and feel as safe as a clam.
Yeah, it is so blatant. It is so blatantly obvious, as you rightly said, it's so blatantly obvious that they do not care about our health. This is not a health issue. This is a control issue. Just look at the way they're killing small businesses and the way that the people are being paid. Here in Canada, it was over $2,000 a month to stay at home. A lot of my friends are artists and hippies, and just that's the most money they've ever received. Ever. Right? You know what I mean? So, if this is sustainable, if we can run a global economy by just paying people to stay at home, then let's just do that, right? But it's not sustainable. Like, we're going to be faced with so many deaths from starvation because of these draconian measures. It's completely irresponsible. It's completely ridiculous, and it makes me think that they just want to kill us. Like, that's what it makes me think. Can I prove that? No. Do I buy into all the conspiracy theories of the extreme right? No, I don't. Obviously, these people are crazy, right? But even crazy people are able to see and recognize some portion of the truth, right? Like, I think I can get as much truth from watching Alex Jones as I can from watching whatever the mainstream channels are. I don't even know.
It might not be as centralized, but I think that it might result in that regardless.
What do you mean?
So, the plan of slavery of mass populations.
The conspiracy.
Yeah, like it may not be one group. Like, it may be different parties, different interests, and it's sort of a messy consequence. Not
aggregate.
Because exactly.
Yeah, but when we think about the food shortages coming and all that, it is frightening. But when I'm thinking about the small businesses being shut down, I had a point that I was trying to get here. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to gather my thoughts here.
Sure.
I think someone did crunch the numbers, and they did create a model that they felt confident was somewhat accurate. That we've already passed the number of deaths that we would have had if we'd done absolutely nothing, and that means not even using like vitamin C, D, zinc, and quercetin whatever. Like, we've already passed those numbers. You know what I mean? That's tragic. Like that's beyond tragic. If it's true, it's beyond tragic. And I believe it is true. I think that the deaths that are already on the books are nothing compared to what's coming. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be like a harbinger of doom, but I mean that's just how I feel. Like I think that we've seen nothing yet really compared to what's coming, right? So it's beyond tragic. I'm at a loss for what to do with this upcoming Canadian federal election. Justin Trudeau claims to be Catholic, but he's pro-abortion, he's pro-vaccine, he's pro all these things. Lockdowns.
Yeah, did you see him do the she session?
No.
Yeah, he incorporated the more woke terminology and new words, and he said something. You know, we need to combat this. Instead of a recession, he genderized it into she session, and it was like, yeah, I recommend you Google it because I didn't believe it till I watched him say it.
Wow. Oh no, I mean he's a ridiculous loser in my books. I mean, it boggles the mind, but. It is sort of a hopeless situation. I can only imagine how you feel as a sort of philosophical anarchist because, I mean, do you spoil your vote? Do you just not even bother going to vote? Like,
no, I don't vote. I do. What I try to do is try to, if people ask me, I educate them on my principles and why and where, because historically, you know, North America, we're better than a lot of the countries have been. Like, you know, obviously there was, you know, monarchies and, you know, slave ownership. And so there is a positive direction, even despite the negative direction we're temporarily moving now. But I feel like, I don't even know because the population has to be ready for a certain type of social order. Like when the Berlin Wall fell, the people in the communist country were maladapted to a free market. Okay. So I think that, you know, the type of consent-based anarchy that I would envision, that type of complex system, may require a population that's educated and, you know, has some level of cooperative means. Like, it is a little utopian, but there are lots of, like you said, like we were talking about earlier, creative solutions. Like the current government top-down solution is too old. We have new tools now that we can utilize to offer the same types of solutions that the government was initially created for, like protection of, you know, rights and those types of things. Like there could be better ways that are worth exploring instead of, you know, monopolizing violence and, you know, governing people without their consent.
So if we look back from the perspective of a future historian and we see, these were the growing pains of big changes in the way that humanity was going to be stewarding creation, or be, you know, the whole ecology movement, for one thing, like that's a big thing that people talk about, whether it's complete bullshit or it's like completely true or somewhere in the middle, it doesn't matter. But the fact is that it's a talking point, right? Like this green stuff. And I've worked for, you know, Pollution Probe, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace. I've worked for these ecological organizations, and they're just rife with Marxist, Leninist, feminist propaganda. Yeah. Like it dominates. It dominates. Okay, so I'm not a fan of these movements because they're godless and they're satanic. But I mean, I want to breathe fresh air and drink clean water, and I think that the most right-wing person on the planet would agree with me, right? Yeah. But the most right-wing person might be super rich and just saying, well, those losers downstream, they're just a bunch of black people and indigenous people and their lives don't matter, so I could just poison them with my effluent and I'll just pay the fine, right? So that big, bad, corporate, right-wing, rich monster, I think, is a trope that corresponds somewhat to reality. These are monsters and they're evil. There's a special place in hell for these people, okay?
Yeah.
But he himself doesn't want to be choking on the air. He doesn't want to get sick from the water he drinks. Like, he himself wants what's best for himself. He just doesn't have that theological virtue of charity, whereby he loves his neighbor as himself, right?
Yeah, and a lot of there's a difference between what the state does and what the state is intended to do. And what's interesting is that advocates of the state, you tend to say, hey, we need a institution to protect those people downstream of this rich asshole. Mm-hmm. But what the state in fact does is protect the rich asshole every time. Like, if you look at the difference between the intention and the technical result, it's fascinating.
Depressing.
Yeah.
Oh God help us all. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of people that are on the fence about God and religion that are going to look at the world and the way the hypocrisy is becoming more and more blatant, and the way that lack of principles manifests itself in suffering and misery, mm-hmm. and more compounding hypocrisy. I think a lot of people are going to be like, okay, this is all overwhelming. It's all very mysterious. It boggles my mind. And it's manifest reality. So if this is mind-boggling, but I'm saying no to God because God and religion is mind-boggling, at least I've got two mind-boggling worlds. I'm going to say yes to the world where God is good. He's all good. He's all knowing. He loves me. He's taking care of me. And he's got a place prepared for me in heaven. And you know what I mean? It's like they're both bewildering. They're both mind-boggling. They're both absurd and incredible. Meaning it's that it's hard to believe in.
Both, I think somebody said the same thing about the existence of life outside of Earth, that no matter which proposition is true, whether we're the only life on the universe or there's other life, they're both equally astonishing.
Right. So the decision then becomes, I think, a little bit easier when we're surrounded by a hellish nightmare here on Earth. And I mean, it could get worse, and I think it's going to get worse. But, and like you said, I mean, this has been ongoing. Like, I mean, I from day one of this so-called pandemic, what I've been saying is I have never, ever been so embarrassed to be a white man. Never. Never have I been so embarrassed to be white as I am now, that, oh my God, white people are getting this illness, and oh, we have to shut down the world. We have to shut down the economy. Okay, have you got your mask? Have you got your rules? Have you got this? Have you got that? It's like, hello, there are people that don't have access to clean drinking water. There are people that don't have shelter. They don't have security. Yeah. They don't have proper shelter. There are people like, what the hell? What kind of white privilege is this?
Yeah. So, we do the 1 trillion, 2 trillion stimulus plan. So there was $2 trillion just sitting around while decades of starving people, it's crazy.
It is embarrassing. It is so hypocritical. I mean, I actually started donating to a Catholic charity that focuses on just like basic needs of people in the developing worlds. Okay, are these charities corrupt? Well, a friend of mine, a Catholic friend, said these are good people. It's not a corrupt charity. Okay, most of the charities are corrupt. Even if it's corrupt, I don't care. Even if it's corrupt and the money to go straight into the pocket, it all goes to just fundraising and more, salaries for CEOs. I don't care. I give my small amount monthly to this place. It's a vote for God. It's a vote for justice. It's a vote for those people who don't have access to clean drinking water. They don't have access to food and shelter and all those sorts of things. Because I'm against all the hype about this first world problem that we have. Like, oh my God, the first world is experiencing this pandemic. Let's just forget about everything else, people, because the white guy's in trouble here with it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I never that thought crossed my mind, but the way you phrased it just now just really punches that point home.
Yeah, it's cringeworthy, but we'll see how it plays out. My hunch is that between now and Christmas, it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be total totalitarian domination like we've never seen before, or Joe Average and Jane Average are going to wake up and say, what the fuck, this is too much. Like, let's forget about this. About this. Push back. And then they'll regroup these powers that be, whether they're united or not united or aggregate or whatever it is. They'll just pull back and they'll say, well, that was pretty good. We advanced further than we ever dreamed we could with this particular push. Our next push, I think, will take us over the edge. And I think we'll have all our plans implemented next time. But let's give society 10, 20 years to sort of forget about what we just put them through, and then we'll go with the final push. That's my hunch. I think that's the way it's going to go. What do you think as your final thought?
It's really 50-50 because I've heard the seeds being planted of this is a trial run for when a real virus happens. Like, good grief. Don't even mention. Oh, no.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yeah. But then on the other hand, I did see footage in Australia of people pushing back the riot police. They were in a mall. They were going to start beating down on some people, for the mask issue. And the crowd gathered around, like, I think it was like 10 police in riot gear, and they were going up the escalator. They're just like, get away. And so,
wow. Have you seen the video? Have you seen the video years ago that was going viral about the oxen or whatever these cow-like creatures were? Like, there's a whole herd of them, and maybe 3 or 4 lions that are just like attacking one of them. And usually the herd just like runs away and lets the dying one die. But this time they came and saved the one that was being attacked. And it's like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious. You outnumber these lions. You outnumber them, and you've got a lot of muscle. You got horns. There's something you can do. It's a real inspiration to these sheep-like masses. And I don't like using the word sheep because I consider myself a sheep in the flock of Jesus Christ. I'd rather use the word goat, for the devilish people that sell out. But the sort of street level label for the people that cave, that don't have principles, is sheep. And do you not realize we have the numbers, we have the strength, we have the power, and we have the principles, and we can, why are we allowing ourselves to be herded by these bullies? It doesn't make sense. But I'm going to let you give the final little closing thought, and we're going to say goodbye. But thanks a lot for coming on, talking to me. And what would you leave the listener with today as your final thought?
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed David and I discussing current events, a little bit of theology and speculation mixed in there. And I had a really fun time. I heard you a little bit on Mass before, but it was fun to hear you rant on this one.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised I haven't received any sort of chastisement from YouTube. I'm thinking of switching over to BitChute just because that's where all the crazy weirdos hang out. And I don't endorse their views. Let me say officially and publicly, I do not endorse the views of any of these people on BitChute because a lot of them are just extreme,
I've
crazy,
never even
and
heard
hateful.
Of BitChute.
BitChute. It's the alternative media source that I've been looking at, and it's an alternative to YouTube. It's sort of like right wing. They hate Jews. They hate homosexuals. They're Holocaust deniers. All kinds of crazy, hateful people. Okay, whoa. But you also get like a variety. Like, it's obviously on the wacky, weird end of the spectrum. Right. You do get a variety nonetheless. And like I say, it just helps swing the pendulum and just sort of see the other side of the coin. Neither one is healthy, right? The right's not healthy, the left's not healthy. But I haven't found a truly Catholic, that's why I avoid Catholic media, because I haven't found a truly Catholic space on the internet, right? Unless it's just some little individual that has their little prayer corner on the little page and they do their devotions and whatever, that's nice. But when it comes to social media, when it comes to exchanges, when it comes to sharing videos and all these sorts of things, I always find a bias. Like, I mean, even what I thought was the most wholesome Catholic video sharing website, it turns out they're rat trats. They hate Pope Francis. Yeah. Like, I can't tolerate that. So it's hard to find a real Catholic space. So, I've got to bounce around between the left and the right and all the crazy ideologies that are being shoved down my throat 24 hours a day if I'm going to interact with people on the internet. And that's just the way it is. But then again, having my own podcast, I can meet people like you, individuals that are truly, free as much as you can be from sort of groupthink. Right? Like, that's very important to me. The Borg, speaking of Star Trek, the Borg was always sort of a menacing idea. That stuck with me too. Was that the second series?
Yes, that was the second series.
Scary.
Yeah.
And Satan does not have creativity. He's not imaginative. He's not colorful. He's dull, dreary, boring, repetitive, and he just takes God's good gifts, offers them to you, so that he can take your eternal soul. That's my Catholic perspective. So he's boring as hell, and not creative, not exciting, not fun, not refreshing. And there's no clean air in hell. There's no fresh drinking water. There's no good food. There's nothing good about hell. So if you're listening to this and you're on the fence about God, I think now's the time to sort of take the plunge, take the leap of faith, and get right with God, because the end is near. I don't want to be dark, but the end is near. It's always near, right?
Yeah,
so that's it. Thank you for being with me. Thanks for chatting with me, and I'll definitely have you back soon. Take care and God bless. Okay.
All right. Thanks, David, for having me on.
See you soon. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.